Amanda Rodriguez, and I work for the Baltimore County State's Attorney's Office. I am in the juvenile unit, but I was recently promoted or given the additional job of overseeing all of our human trafficking prosecution in Baltimore County. I've been a member of the Maryland Human Trafficking Task Force since just after its inception, since 2008. And I've been working on these cases since then. I actually started getting involved in human trafficking when I was in law school. I had a project where I was asked to write a paper on anything that involved the sale of any good that involved a legal issue, and I kind of fell into human trafficking that way. And it became something that I was really involved in and really interested in, and I learned a lot about it, about what is really the buying and selling of human beings. And when I got into the state's attorney's office, they didn't have anybody that was doing the prosecution of trafficking, and then a person in my division started to look into it. He was very involved in domestic violence, very interested in that. He was a retired police officer, and he asked me to get involved, and I've kind of been doing it since then. Baltimore County, we have, it's really similar to what Ed said. I think that it's like a little piece of Maryland, because we have a very urban area, and then we have a very rural area, and we have suburban kind of in the middle. So we have a huge problem with massage parlors. They're all over our beautiful county, especially up and down York Road, which is kind of our major thoroughfare in Baltimore County. I would say the majority of the prosecutions that I've seen for massage parlor cases are actually on York Road. There's some on the east side, some on the west side. But we have a huge influx of Asians, nationals, that come in. They actually come in from New York. They're driven down. They're rotated in and out of the massage parlors, usually in 2 to 4 week intervals, because the same girl can't stay there, both for safety from prosecution, law enforcement, and because, just like Ed said, they like new blood. People hit these things very regularly. The other thing that we have a big problem in Baltimore County is really domestic prostitution. We have, especially on the east side of the county, which is Dundalk. If you think about the east side of the city, it's basically the same thing. We just get pushed closer to the water. I'm going to try not to do that with my coat. So we have a huge problem with domestic prostitution, where very young girls, whether it's drug-related or not, get involved in prostitution and then end up with seeking out pimps, seeking out somebody that's going to traffic them to and from their appointments. They're very vulnerable because they do tend to be poorer than the rest of the county. They do tend to have a higher rate of being hooked on some type of narcotic, whether it's heroin or cocaine. So that's the east side of our county. Right down the middle we have massage parlors, and on the west side we have what I would say is more violent human trafficking. We have human trafficking. The more that I've seen of force has been on the west side of the county. They seem to have closer ties to the city, so they tend to be kind of what I would more mixed in with our drug prosecution. The Maryland human trafficking law passed in 2007. So that's when it became a crime in Maryland to traffic a human being. Sometimes people think that it's been around for a long time, and it really hasn't. Part of the reason that we see such a huge bubble of it in Baltimore County is really because we haven't been prosecuting it for that long. We don't have that many police officers that are assigned to this issue. In fact, if you think about our narcotics prosecution, we have, it's a CIVBID unit, and we have 3 major groupings of detectives that specifically work our drug enforcement. For human trafficking, I have a vice unit that oversees not only my human trafficking cases, but also all of the illegal gambling in the state, basically anything that a vice unit does. They're kind of the overflow unit. There are, I want to get this right, I think there are 5 detectives in my vice unit. Only 2 of them are really gung-ho about human trafficking. They're the ones that tend to bring me the cases. So of all of the crime that I have, of all of the police officers that I have in all of Baltimore County, I have 2 officers that bring me human trafficking cases. I don't know if you guys are that familiar with terminology. I know that Ed kind of touched on stuff. So a John is the person that's buying the prostitute. You have the trafficker. The bottom, or the bottom bitch, is in a more organized prostitution ring, you're going to have a girl who is actually she's the disciplinarian. She's the one that does a lot of the abuse on the girls that are in the ring, and it's simply because the guy doesn't want to get involved. He wants to continue to be seen as this safety figure for the girl. He wants to continue to be this person that she runs to and feels safe with so that she doesn't leave. What we definitely see a lot of is girls that you would think are what I call the unwilling participants, that you think that they're willing participants. You see girls who may have chosen prostitution as a way to make money. And on the surface, it really looks like this is just prostitution. I think that's a problem, a misconception across the board. I think that a lot of people really think that somebody is choosing this as a profession, and so it's just prostitution, something that's been around since who knows when, and it's just prostitution, it's gross, we don't want to think about it, it's in the dark alleys of our society, but it's nothing that's really out in, it's something that we can see with our naked eye. It's kind of like, well, the drug dealers are out there somewhere, but they're not like walking around, they're not at Starbucks with me, so I'm not going to think about it. With human trafficking, these girls, although they may look like they're coming into this and they're like, oh, well, I chose this, or, oh, well, I placed the ad for myself originally, when they get into a position where they're being trafficked, it's no longer willing. On the surface, it may look like it's not a big deal. But if you really start to delve deeper, which is something that we're starting to see in Baltimore County, because the law passed in 2007, initially we had some of these prosecutions that you were like, oh, well, it's just a boyfriend driving his girlfriend to the hotel where she's going to have sex, and it's what she's chosen to do, so it's fine. Now we're really starting to be able to delve a little bit deeper and figure out that that guy that drove that girlfriend to the, Motel 8 on such and such a day, well, 2 weeks later he was driving another girl to a different motel. Oh, wait a minute, we prosecuted him last week and he was driving 3 more girls to 3 different hotels. And you're really starting to see how big of an issue it is, even in a place like Baltimore County. It's not the city, we don't have a huge population, we're very spread out, but at the same time, we're on the 95 corridor. So you're going to see a ton of prostitution and therefore a ton of trafficking. And even some of these girls that you sit there and think, oh, it's just prostitution, it's not a big deal, she's choosing to do this, it's her freedom of choice to sell her body, whatever. Okay, well, let's really think about who would decide that this is what they want to do, that this is how they're going to make money. It's the girls that are high on drugs because they have no other way to support their habit. Most of the time, the guys are the ones that get them on drugs. It's going to be girls that have absolutely no self-esteem, more likely than not have been molested or raped as children. So this is the only lifestyle that they know. Or it's going to be foreign nationals that are completely exploitable because they're here, they don't speak the language, and they don't understand our culture. So I think there's a really big misconception about who is a willing participant in this type of career, in this path, essentially, is what I'm saying. I will say that in my office, we do not prosecute Johns. And the reason that we don't prosecute Johns is because I have absolutely no police officers that will charge a man with a crime involving prostitution. I think I have seen 2 cases since I've been there of a John being prosecuted. And something that I implemented since I've taken over for the human trafficking prosecutions is whenever I have a case, especially in massage parlors lately, because that's what I've been getting, I bring in every John that they've identified and have them sit in the courtroom while I prosecute the case. And oftentimes it's the defense attorneys who come up to me and beg me, please just let those guys go. It's going to be a plea, don't worry about it. The stuff that they see them in court, they're like, it's okay, just let them leave. And I make them sit throughout the entire thing because it sickens me that some man has decided that he's going to exploit a young woman or an old woman in that way and think that it's not a big deal and he's just going to walk back to his family. The other thing I wanted to touch on briefly is I think there's also a misconception with who are these Johns and who are these traffickers. As far as the Johns that I bring in, I will say Johns include police officers, because I haven't prosecuted them, but I've seen them in my statements of probable cause. I had one police officer who was specifically quoted as he was interviewed by my detective saying, oh, I didn't think this was a crime. Firemen, I have prosecuted as traffickers. People in the military, privates, I don't think I had a sergeant. Somebody that was higher than a private. I don't really know all the...
Corporal?
Thank you, corporal. Prosecuted a corporal for human trafficking. We have pastors that I prosecuted as both a trafficker and pastors that I brought in that were Johns. These are not men that are... I think there's the stereotype of the 500 to 600 pound guy, sweaty guy going in because he can't get it anywhere else. But I will say that a lot of the times when I send my detectives back out to do interviews with Johns, they tend to be men with families. They tend to be men that are educated. They tend to be men that have really well-paying jobs, that look relatively happy in their marriage. In the paper that I did when I started doing some research into why men do this, I found that the majority of them say that they have happy marriages, that it really has nothing to do with, and very satisfactory sex lives. I think there's something really deeper there that our culture has not even touched on. It's something that we definitely need to look into, I think, as a society, is why men think that this is acceptable. And I think more so why men think that I say men, I'm sure there are women that engage as well, but why those people don't think that they're victimizing when they do this. And I think it's because they often sit there and just think this girl's doing it because she wants to, and she's getting paid, so what's the big deal? Traffickers are every race, age, religion, socioeconomic class. I've seen it all across the board. So I think that as long as you realize that there are victims everywhere, and you have to open your eyes to realize that these traffickers are going to exploit whoever they can exploit. They're at malls, they're on the metro telling girls that they're pretty, hey, do this for me. They tend to gain their trust, and then they essentially take them for all that they're worth, or all that they think that this girl's body is worth. I think that's all that I have.